evening, art lovers and history nerds. Welcome to the only show where you'll learn about the Cold War, Andy Warhol, and why disco ruined everything, all in one sitting. Today, me, Jadan, and Preetha are gonna be covering 25 years of chaos, genius, and bad decisions from the 1950s to 1975. Think of it like The Crown, but with more paint and less polite tea drinking. Let's dive in. Let's start in the 1950s. The world was split into two teams: Team Capitalism Rules, led by the US, and Team Communism Forever, led by the Soviet Union. And in Korea, both teams showed up like it was a full contact soccer match. Spoiler, it ends in a tie. Meanwhile, in America, Jackson Pollock was busy inventing a new way to paint. His process was basically this: throw paint everywhere and call it art. His masterpiece, Convergence? Critics said it's chaos, and Pollock said exactly. It was the perfect metaphor for the Cold War: messy, unpredictable, and someone's probably going to slip on it. Now, while Pollock was painting chaos, Mark Rothko was like, what if we do the opposite? His art is literally rectangles, giant blocks of color. But don't let the simplicity fool you. Looking at Rothko's orange and yellow is like staring into your soul while your therapist nods silently. It was deep, emotional, and perfect for saying, the Cold War is stressing me out. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviets were like, abstract art? No way. Their thing was socialist realism. Huge murals of happy workers building a utopia. You know, the kind of art that makes you think, am I inspired or scared? Spoiler, it's scary. Some other things that happened in the 1950s included the post-war boom, which turned America into a shopping spree where everyone wanted a car, fridge, and a reason to brag at dinner parties. Apart from that, suburbanization happened, which was basically the great escape from city noise to white picket fences. But the most important fact of all was the rise of rock and roll. Elvis shook his hips, broke some rules, and turned thank you very much into a lifestyle, and parents everywhere clutched their pearls. The 1950s was also big in mid-century modern architecture, which was all about sleek furniture, big windows, and making sure your living room looked like a stylish spaceship landing pad. And last but not least, Dior's new look in the 1950s was all about cinched waists, full skirts, and making sure women look fabulous while trying to squeeze through narrow doorways.
By the 60s, America was getting wild. Civil rights protests, the Vietnam War, and Andy Warhol saying, you know what's art? Soup. His Campbell's soup cans were genius. Warhol looked at the consumer culture and thought, why paint fancy stuff when people just want soup and Marilyn Monroe? His Marilyn diptych was a commentary on celebrity worship. But also, let's be real, it's the OG Instagram greed now. So, if Marilyn were alive today, she would totally repost it with a comment, thanks for the love, Andy. Then, there's Roy Lichtenstein, who saw comic books and said, why isn't this in a museum? His painting Wham from 1963 takes fighter jet explosion and turns it into high art. Lichtenstein's work was basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe of the art world. Explosive, dramatic, and 100% better with popcorn. While Warhol and Lichtenstein were turning pop culture into art, Jacob Lawrence was painting the real stories. His Migration series captured the struggle of African Americans moving north for the better life. His art was raw, emotional, and much needed reality check in the world obsessed with Marilyn and soup. Imagine if TikTok existed back then. POV, you're watching history in bold colors. Parallelly, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches weren't just words. They were a call to action, a vision for justice, and a dream that still inspires us today. And then there was Donald Judd, who said, why complicate things? His minimalist sculptures were sleek, geometric, and perfect for people who hate clutter. Judd's art said, life is messy, but my rectangles? Flawless. Honestly, his pieces belong in every IKEA catalog. Now, we are at the end of 1960s and will come to the decade of punk, protest and performance. You guessed it right, 1970s. In 1969, the LGBTQ community at Stonewall said, "We are done with your nonsense." This wasn't just a riot, it was a revolution. And artist Gabriel Baker turned the revolution into rainbow flag, which became a global symbol of pride. Baker basically said, "Let's fight our oppression with fabulous colors." And just like that, 60s left its mark, a time of women rising, disco spinning, and dreams of equality taking flight. The world was changing and there was no turning back.
Keith Haring was a game changer, turning everyday public places into vibrant art galleries. His subway art, with its radiant babies, dancing figures, and interconnected lines, was more than eye-catching. It was a statement. Haring believed that art should be accessible to everyone, not just hung up in fancy galleries. His work, like the posters or the dynamic four-panel dancing figures, was bursting with energy. By 1970s, Marina Abramović was redefining art. In Rhythm Zero, she stood still while the audience did whatever they wanted. Someone kissed, someone else pointed loaded gun at her. It was terrifying and groundbreaking. Mariana proved that sometimes the most powerful art doesn't need a canvas. It needs nerves of steel and a really good therapist. While Mariana was standing still, Vivienne Westwood was tearing it apart literally. Her punk fashion dripped skirts added safety pins and screamed, "Who cares about roles?" Westwood's design were the clothing equivalent of a mic drop at a bad comedy show. She basically invented cool. Let's not forget Saul Levitt, who said, "Why bake the art yourself when you can just write instructions?" His wall drawings were DIY masterpiece like the IKEA furniture of art. It was brilliant because the audience did the work and Levitt got the credit. Genius, huh?
The space race of the 1960s wasn't just about rockets. It launched a cultural obsession with all things futuristic. Architecture joined in with space-age buildings featuring curves, domes, and materials that felt like they belonged on the moon. Meanwhile, art embraced bold cosmic themes, while design took on sleek aerodynamic forms that screamed jet-age chic. Suddenly, everything, from furniture to fashion, looked like it could survive zero gravity. Last but not least, in the 1970s, psychedelic art made a huge impact, with posters of artists like the Grateful Dead exploding with swirling colors and mind-bending visuals capturing the wild energies of the 70s counterculture. Woodstock and the Monterey Pop Festival became legendary, where music, peace, and tie-dye collided in fields, creating a vibe that was half concert, half spiritual awakening. Together, they created a cultural revolution, proving that sometimes the best way to change the world is through music, art, and a whole lot of flower crowns.
That's it for tonight, folks. Which moment from this era blew your mind? History is best when it's messy and loud. Until next time, stay curious and maybe avoid starting another Cold War. Okay, see you later.